Welcome. Tonight, we will drift into the heart of the 19th century. Before we begin, turn off your phone, dim the lights, and let yourself sink into the quiet. As you listen, I'd love to hear from you. Write in the comments which part of this journey spoke to you most. The struggles of the factory children, the words of Dickens, or the mysteries of Whitechapel. Now, take a slow breath. Imagine the smoke of Victorian London drifting in, a haze of coal dust and damp mist. You are standing at the edge of a narrow street. The world of the slum is waiting. Imagine yourself very small, no more than 8 years old, perhaps younger. The sun has not yet risen, but the bells are already ringing. You wake in a single room shared with your family, in a building that seems to sag under the weight of too many lives inside it. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of coal smoke that never really leaves your lungs. You pull on rough clothes, hand-me-down garments, patched again and again, until the fabric itself seems to be a quilt of repairs. There are no shoes, or if there are, they pinch and rub at your feet. A crust of bread, perhaps with a thin spread of dripping, is all there is to eat before you step into the dark morning. The walk to the factory is short but cold. Gas lamps flicker dimly in the mist, their light catching on wet cobblestones. Other children hurry alongside you, some whispering, some silent. The factory looms ahead, its tall chimneys breathing out a constant plume of black smoke. Inside, the sound is immediate and overwhelming. Iron machines clatter and thrum. Wooden looms rattle. Leather belts spin endlessly. You are guided to your station, perhaps beneath the loom itself. The space is low, just enough for a child to crawl. That is your task, to tie the threads when they snap, to fetch broken pieces, to keep the machine running. The air is thick with cotton fibers. They float like snow, but instead of freshness, they clog your throat and sting your eyes. Each breath feels heavy. Sometimes you cough until your chest aches, but there is no stopping. Hours pass in a blur of repetition. The overseer walks among the rows, his footsteps sharp on the floorboards. He watches for mistakes. If you work too slowly, there may be a harsh word, or worse, a quick strike of the cane. You learn to keep your head down, to move your hands quickly, even when your fingers are raw and swollen from the constant tying and tugging of threads. The rhythm of the machines becomes your world. The clack of wooden shuttles, the hum of belts, the sigh of steam again and again, the rhythm of your days. At midday, there is a short pause. Perhaps you are given a small portion of food, bread, potatoes, or a thin broth. You eat quickly, not for pleasure, but to quiet the emptiness in your stomach. And then the machines start again, relentless. As afternoon wears into evening, the windows grow dim. Gas lamps are lit, and shadows stretch across the rows of looms. Your back is sore from crouching. Your eyes blur from strain. But the work continues, sometimes for 14 hours, until at last the bells signal the day's end. You leave with other children, stepping once more into the night. The streets are slick with damp. Your hands ache, your lungs burn. Tomorrow, you know, it will be the same. The rhythm of their lives, a constant struggle between exhaustion and survival. And yet, in this world of endless labor, children like you provided the energy that kept the engines of empire moving. Every yard of cloth, every spool of thread, carried with it the unseen toil of thousands of small hands. Take a slow breath here. Let the sound of the looms fade away. The clatter and the smoke soften into silence, leaving only the steady rhythm of your own breath. In the quiet, we will now turn to the story of one child who lived through this world and who grew to shape how we remember it. Imagine for a moment that same Victorian world, but now we narrow our focus to one small boy, a child whose name you know very well today, though at the time he was simply another struggling face in the crowded streets of London. His name was Charles Dickens. He was born in 1812 in Portsmouth, on the southern coast of England. His father, John Dickens, was a clerk in the Navy Pay Office. The family was lively, full of children, laughter, and the kind of hope that often marks the beginning of a life. But hope alone did not pay the bills. His father spent more than he earned, and debts began to press against the family. By the time Charles was 12 years old, his childhood was suddenly reshaped. His father was arrested for debt and sent to the Marshalsea prison. For young Charles, this meant not only the shame of seeing his family's name fall, but also the end of schooling and the beginning of harsh work. He was sent to Warren's blacking factory, a place that produced polish for boots. Picture him there, a small boy among rats, pasting labels on bottles of polish for 10 hours a day. The room smelled sharply of vinegar and black paste. The work was repetitive and numbing, his hands constantly sticky, his clothes always stained. For Charles, this was more than work. It was humiliation. His dreams of education, of becoming something more, seemed to fade with each passing day. He later described the feeling as a deep despair, one that never quite left him, even in adulthood. He felt abandoned, discarded, invisible. And yet, that invisibility gave him eyes to see what others ignored. The crowded lodgings, the hungry children, the endless labor. These impressions pressed into his memory would resurface years later as the lifeblood of his novels. After some months, Charles's father was released from prison, and Charles was able to leave the factory. He returned to school, eventually finding work as a clerk and later as a journalist. But the memory of that factory room, the paste, the rats, and the despair, it never left him. As he began to write stories, he poured those memories into his characters. When you read about young Oliver Twist asking for more food in the workhouse, you hear echoes of Dickens's own hunger. When you follow the journey of David Copperfield, you are, in truth, following Dickens himself. The characters who suffer in dark alleys, who fight for dignity in a cold city, are drawn from the people he observed as a boy and from the child he once was. In adulthood, Dickens became a celebrated figure. His works were read not just in England, but across the world. His readings drew crowds. His serialized novels were eagerly awaited by working families who pooled their pennies together to buy the latest installment. He became both famous and wealthy. But even then, even in his moments of triumph, he carried with him that wounded 12-year-old boy. He was never able to entirely forgive his parents for sending him into the factory. He remained haunted by the sense of abandonment, of being unseen. And perhaps it was that very wound that gave his writing such power. He gave voice to the voiceless. He made the suffering of the poor impossible to ignore. And yet, his stories are not only dark. They contain warmth, humor, redemption. Dickens understood suffering, but he also understood the spark of kindness that could lighten it. A kindly benefactor, a loyal friend, an unexpected act of generosity. These were the beams of light he wove into his fiction, balancing despair with hope. So, as you lie here listening, you might imagine him. An older man, standing at a desk, pen in hand, candle burning low. His children asleep in another room. his mind wandering back to the factory floor of his childhood, and then forward onto the page, creating lives that never existed, but which told the truth all the same. In Dickens, the boy who had once pasted labels in silence became the man whose words could shake an empire's conscience. Take a long breath. Let the image of Dickens's world drift gently away. The sound of a pen scratching on paper grows fainter. The candle dims. And so we close the pages of this story. From the shadows of a child at work to the pen that would give voice to the voiceless, Dickens showed us that even suffering can be transformed into light. As the candle fades and the streets of Victorian London fall silent, let your own thoughts soften. The noise of the day grows distant now, like footsteps disappearing into fog. Thank you for journeying with me through history. If this story has stayed with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Which part spoke to you most? And if you'd like to walk further into the quiet paths of the past, join us again and let the stories of history carry you gently into rest. For now, breathe deeply, settle into stillness, and let sleep take you as softly as the turning of a page. Good night.